It's all lies. I have seen what it takes to build a profitable online business, and it is very difficult. One might argue that 12 hours at BlackRock is significantly easier. You definitely get paid more.
I'm trying to reconcile how you flipped from being like an alpha, super type A overachiever to being so calm and not giving an F about money.
Competition is being seen or feeling validated. And if you are using money to feel validated, it's a slippery slope.
Can you explain when you said you live off the margin?
I could go like 3 months without making any money. When I run out, I just borrow against my portfolio.
How did you develop that level of trust?
I'm in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of internet creators where I'm in the bottom 25% of business income. I'm never in the bottom 25% of anything that I do. But
when I was researching your profile, I keep seeing these photos of you with six-pack abs.
my wife makes sure that she's like, whenever you show a picture of your six-pack, you need to show a picture of your parents so that people have the context. She's like, my parents are Irish and Danish, and we do not have the Southeast Asian BMI.
What are the qualities of a self-aware person?
Joseph Heller is outside a party of a billionaire, and his friend turns to him and he says, Joseph, you're a writer. This person makes more than you make in a minute. He's got mansions and this and that. How does that make you feel? He's like, well, I feel fine because I have something that he'll never have.
In today's episode, we're talking to Khe Hy, who walked away from a $2 million Wall Street salary to become a writer.
Today, he's known as the Oprah for millennials and helps others live a more self-aware life.
Stick till the end to learn why he doesn't believe in buying a house or keeping money in a savings account. What are the qualities of a self-aware person?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think one of the biggest one is what I would say, and this is not my language, this is probably some hybrid interpretation through, therapy and spiritual texts, is understanding your core wounds, right? And I think that all of us, whether we grew up extremely wealthy with a silver spoon and everything laid out for us, or if we're struggling, if our parents struggled, if they were immigrants new to this country, didn't speak the language, everyone has a core. That's part and parcel with being human, is to have a core wound. Now, maybe when I'll give you some of mine. It's like when I was little, I was extremely skinny and I had a strange gait when I walked. And so people would always say, you walk like a girl. Like, you can just dismiss that as kids being kids. But when when it's something that you do, almost as frequently as breathing, walking, every time you take a step, you are wondering, is this person judging me? Is this person going to make fun of me? Do I feel safe? Emotionally safe, right? And you could say like toughen. I mean, this is the generation. I'm a young Gen X, but the generation I grew up in is like toughen up. Just don't let that get to you, right? Which leads to the next way that you can develop that self-awareness, which is something that I've only recently learned in the past year or so, is to be able to experience the full range of human emotions. And I don't want to say good or bad emotions. Emotions are emotions. Maybe we can say uncomfortable emotions: anger, sadness, jealousy, fear, loss. Can you really be with those emotions? And this is where we go back to that first question is, let's say you're grieving. We lost my father-in-law passed 4 or 5 months ago. Let's say you're grieving a huge loss. You could cope, put your head down, work harder, raise your hand more. Basically any drink, smoke weed, surf the internet, play video games, look at pornography, anything other than to feel that loss. But to add a little levity, I think there's a comedian, her name is, I think it's Whitney Cummings. She said, holding in your emotions is like holding it in a fart. You can only do it for so long. And once it comes out, it's going to be really painful and embarrassing. Like, you cannot hold in grief. It will come up. It will come out. You might snap. It might come up in the form of road rage. It might come up in the form of binge drinking. It might come up in the form of emotional disassociation from the people around you. It might come out in the form of burnout and workaholism.
Would you say that the coping strategies, at least in the short term, helped you become successful?
Hell yeah. Absolutely.
But you're
Absolutely.
arguing that it's not a good long-term solution?
Coping works, but it's called coping for a reason, because it's not an actual solution. Now, some people might cope until they're on their deathbed, right? And in fact, what are one of the regrets of the dying? I wish I had worked less hard. Wish I had the confidence. I forget exactly. I wish I had the confidence to express myself truly. So you could argue, it's like, Plato and the allegory of the cave. You could argue that, okay, well, if you find that out on your deathbed, like maybe you're okay because you basically coped your way until death. I actually think that's probably an okay argument, but I don't think it's binary like that. Because it's, instead of like it being a binary, I think it's more like a tire that has rolled over a nail. It's like slowly deflating, and the car is not, at the beginning, the car is just inefficient in its gas mileage. And then one day you're stuck on the side of the highway in the middle of the night in a no cell phone zone. And you're like, oh crap, this is when the cope stops working.
Right. So I'm trying to connect the dots in going back to the CEO example. So you're essentially saying you're not asking the CEO to quit. You're asking the CEO to become more self-aware and have more balance in their life. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not asking the CEO anything, because it's ultimately their decision. But what I'm asking a CEO to say, or anyone, is to reflect on their life and say, one of the other regrets of the dying is people ask on their deathbed, did I love well? And again, I'm giving you the questions that land for me, right? Did I love well is a question that lands for me. And look, there are moments when I don't love well. But if there's a 3-month stretch when I'm not loving well, there's a problem for me. Now, others might not view that as a problem because it might be part of a bigger plan. And others might be just completely naive to it. They're like, I didn't even know I wasn't loving well. I didn't even know that that's a thing that's important. And maybe it's not important to them. So the question to anyone just becomes, what do you stand for? How do you show up in this world? Are you doing that? If not, what's preventing you from doing it? And are you showing up the way you want to show up? Again, some people want to show up as the best CEO in the whole universe, and that's all they want to show up as. Great. If that's all you want to show up as, and you're showing up that way, kudos to you.
Can you define loving well? Because in my head, I'm thinking that the definition should be relative to the person and how they think about it. But what's your definition of loving well?
Loving well, so a very simple one, and I think this is like beyond. This is not romantic love or even the love a parent has for its child. I think loving well is there was someone who worked at BlackRock, a very senior guy, and people would always talk about him, and they would say that person talks to the cleaning staff at 9 p.m. with the same level of care and look and depth in his eyes as he does with the chairman of the board. And to me, that is loving your other humans well, which is, again, this is my definition. I've adapted it from one of my spiritual teachers, Tara Brach, but she calls love the fullness of presence. So in that case, what I took away from that BlackRock story is, when I'm with you, I'm with you. I'm with the two of you right now. I am 100% with you. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not worrying about anything else. I want to give you the best interview and show up in the most authentic way. That is my love for you as fellow humans. I feel that I try to show up like that way with my kids. But guess what? My kids have a saying. They say, Dad, you're in La La Land. La La Land. Dad. And then now they're old enough. They're like, Mom, Dad's in La La Land. He's pretending to say it. They can see. My daughter will be saying, it's like, so what's, do you like Bad Bunny more than Drake or Taylor Swift right now? And I'd be like, Bad Bunny. And she's like, Dad, you were in La La Land. You weren't listening to me. And if I'm in La La Land, it's this sweet kind of parenting, quip. But if I'm in La La Land for like extended periods of time, that's not how I want to show up.
So when you were at BlackRock and you had this high salary, was the decision to quit, was that like something that was, in the back of your head for a long time, or was it like a snap, in the moment thing? And also the second part to the same question is, instead of quitting, did you ever thought about being, like, as you say, more self-aware and staying at the job and trying to live a more balanced life instead of outright
Yeah.
quitting?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first, I would say what it might look like on the surface is that I am a big risk seeker. Is I'm actually very risk averse, and so quitting that job, I actually didn't think was very risky, even though I didn't have a plan. Even though my wife is an artist, so her financial compensation is quite low, and we can't get healthcare through her job, and that I had an 18-month-old newborn. I actually did not think it was risky for a very, very simple reason. I'm very employable. I did not burn any bridges. I never talk smack. I mean, I say what my issues were with the industry, but I never talk smack. I always show up to every relationship I have, trying to add value in little ways or large ways. Behind the scenes, making introductions, forwarding people articles, checking in, I send birthday videos to everyone that I would consider a peer or a friend. So it's like I send like 150 birthday videos a year. So I just knew that I'm very employable. And look, I wouldn't get back. I had a very good job, but even if I got back 50% of my job, I'd be fine. And I know I could work my way back up. So as a starting point, I just want to what I think is very important for me to state up front. I don't think I made a risky decision, while most people think I did. And they'll still think I did after they hear this, but I want to explain my thinking. Was it a binary decision? Absolutely not. It was a very, very slow burn. I call it the pebble in the shoe, where let's say you're walking and you get a pebble like into your sneaker, and it starts to get like a little bit annoying, but you can still walk. You're rushed. You got somewhere to be. The time that it takes, this is the point on self-awareness, the time that it takes to stop walking, take your shoes off, unlace them, take out the pebble, readjust your sock, put your shoe back on, tie the laces, start walking in. It's just too much in this busy society. And so I had noticed that there was a pebble in my shoe, and a few things were showing up. One is I was just going through the motions at work. It just was boring. I was just bored. That's one. Two, I had a full experience of the Hedonic Treadmill, where I was getting these eye-popping bonuses. And, we had an amazing apartment in Dumbo. And, I bought my first apartment at 27, and all my kids' call 529s were saved for. But the next dollar, I really saw in geek terms, the marginal value of the next dollar was not bringing me, it definitely wasn't bringing me happiness. And that's when I got a taste of this kind of core wound, where I'm like, wait a minute. On the surface, everything about my life is going perfect, but there's a feeling that feels off. I owe it to myself to figure out what that is. And so I think those culminated, and then I felt like I had saved enough. I had saved enough money to take 18 months off, and then I bet on myself. I was like, we literally took 18 months worth of savings. We put it in a different account, drew a quote unquote salary from that account. And I told Lisa, my wife, when that account goes to zero, I'll just raise my hand again. I'll go back to get another job.
Did you have a plan on what you will do after you quit?
No, but I know I would just try to do stuff for 18 months. However, I had tried to start, I guess, side projects while I was still working, which is quite hard when you have a newborn and 12-hour workdays. But I had tried, so I had written an anonymous culture blog about New York City, like art, music, and food scene. I had tried to learn coding to create a personal CRM. I had written business plans on like what I called Uber for headhunters. So I try to build like a referral network for headhunters. So like you incentivize people to refer candidates to recruiters. I had looked at trying to see if I could start a community and an events company. I hosted a lot of events. So I had tried a lot of things. None of them were necessary. So to me, and this has always been my philosophy, none of them were things that I thought might be businesses, but I'm always trying to show myself that I will show up the right way. And so I knew that while working 12 hours, trying to squeeze in another 2 to 4 hours a day of side projects, I knew if you gave me 18 months of free time, I didn't watch TV or smoke weed or anything like that. I mean, here and there, but not like all the time. But I went and I tried stuff, and I'm still trying. I mean, if we need an entire podcast series for me to describe to you all of the things that I have tried between May 5th, 2015 and today, 9 years later. We need like an entire, we could do a podcast series on each year.
I assume, though, that at the end of those 18 months, your account didn't go to zero. Since you're still...
Well, here's the thing. It didn't, and it didn't, and it kind of did in that, this is the crazy thing about like plans and stuff. Right when I left, so it got close to zero, but that's because there were opportunities to make money, but I was turning them down because it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So it was going to zero, but I knew that I could not make it go to zero. I was just being pickier about how I wanted to spend my time. But here's why I was doing that was when I left, it was a ripping bull market. And I didn't plan that. That was not baked into any models. But 3 years after leaving, despite, I think I made like 100,000 total in 3 years, my net worth had gone up significantly. Now you can't eat your capital gains. And obviously what goes up can and might come down. But it was almost like 3 years had gone by and I was quote unquote wealthier than when I had left. And I was like, okay, I just ditched the plan. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
And how long did it take to finally find something that you wanted to do?
I'm still not sure. I mean, I love the activities that I do. So I have written a newsletter every week pretty much since January of 2015. So I've written 437 consecutive newsletters. I started blogging weekly about 350 weeks ago. And I've posted on Twitter, which is my favorite social media platform, for 485 consecutive days. None of those feel like a chore. And now we're approaching a year of podcasting. When things start feeling like a chore to me, I stop doing them. Now I pierce through that resistance. It's not like writers, I stop writing when I get writer's block. But I'm actually starting to get to the point where like my little 350, my 800 word essays that I write weekly, I just don't feel inspired writing them anymore. Might be time to retire that. I'm feeling crazy inspired about my podcast, might be time to do something more there, right? So I have always led with aliveness. This thing makes me feel alive. Now, monetization is a different question. I'm actually not great at monetization on the internet. It's a very, very difficult thing. And it's very hard to monetize without going back to your Wall Street life, because all the BS that all the, 7-figure entrepreneurs, ghostwriters, it's all, I've seen the other side of it. They're all lies. It's all lies. I have seen what it takes to build a profitable, sustaining online business, and it is very difficult. One might argue that 12 hours in front of a Bloomberg at BlackRock is significantly easier. You definitely get paid more. And so I have never been great at monetization, mostly because I have a lot of line in the sands of things that I'm unwilling to do. Like I'm not willing to travel for work. I'm not willing to work beyond 7 p.m. I'm not willing to work before 11. And they're just lines in the sand. They're just, no amount of money is going to make me pierce those lines. And in part, it's because of decisions I've made in the past with my money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
trying
the
to reconcile how you flipped from being like an alpha, super type A, overachiever, to being so calm and not giving an F about money. Like that's like a
Mm.
shift, which I'm like still in my head is like how does someone like your personality does that? Like it's just so
Mm.
hard.
Are you wondering how
Wow.
you can do that?
Yeah,
to
I'm in my
do
head like
that?
how can I do the same?
Well, I think there's two things about money that are very, very, they're actually, money is it's just the gateway. It's actually not about the money. So there's two things about money. There's what happens if you lose it all, and what does it bring to you if you get a lot of it. And they're actually, I think they're two completely different parts of your brain, your psyche, but they're unified by this thing called money, right? So there's a scarcity mindset, this belief that, I'm going to go back, right? I'm going to, I grew up lower middle class. Like there's this fear that I'll go back. I would get, I grew up in New York City. I was mugged 3 times walking to school, one time with a box cutter when I was 12. There's a fear that I have that my kids will have to experience. I never would want any kid. And I grew up fine, like lower middle class, above Maslow's bottom 2 high. But yeah, I mean, I would never want a kid to have a box cutter, put close to their neck at 12. So I have that fear that if I make bad decisions, I will get to that point. That's like the primal fear. But there's a lot of steps between that happening and bad financial decisions. So that's like, and I mean that's a whole conversation. I mean, we have like entire like day-long workshops on this, on scarcity, right? That's scarcity mindset. And then the other side of it is, what is money like? The other side of it is is a saying, money can only solve money problems. And so when you get to the side of having more, what's competition, right? Competition is being seen or feeling validated, right? And if you are using money to feel validated, it's a slippery slope. And look, I've experienced that, right? I'm in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of internet creators where I'm in the bottom 25% of business income. I'm never in the bottom 25% of anything that I do. But I also know what it takes to be in the top decile of that group. And I am not willing to do it. And I also know that when I do feel the temptation to do it, is because I was an insecure kid. It goes back to that core wound. I was an insecure kid. No woman ever took interest in me. I literally researched when I was a kid, this was in the 80s, can a single man adopt a kid? This was before the internet, because I thought no one would marry me, but I wanted to be a dad. I was like 12-year-old. So that 12-year-old I was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. I was thinking about this. I'm like, there's nothing more that 12-year-old wanted was to be in the front page of the Wall Street Journal with a picture of my shirt, with my shirt off, because I'm surfing. There's nothing more than that 12-year-old boy wanted. But at the same time, again, I've tasted the hedonic treadmill, and I know I've experienced it, that a lot of nice emails and tweets today, tomorrow, it all washes away. Whatever baseline happiness I entered that Wall Street Journal article with, it will spike. I think at this point, I know it's just pleasure. That comes from validation, and it will mean revert tomorrow. I've experienced it so many times.
The one thing that I'm trying to reconcile in your story is, I mean, you did very well for yourself for a while in in conventional terms, certainly in monetary terms, it sounds like. And it also sounds like, from what you were saying, your ability to live the life that you want to live on your own terms is in part predicated on investments you made prior. So you have some resources that'll
I have financial
keep you
resources,
going.
absolutely.
So to what degree do we need that achievement culture to get to the point where we have the freedom to live life on our own terms? Freedom from, falling down to the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy.
Well, I think, look, I'll tell you, there's a story of a friend who I have. He's one of the happiest people I've ever met. I think he's probably 35. If I had to guess, he's probably averaged $70,000 a year for the past 8 years. Him and his wife live in a tiny apartment in Texas. They didn't have a car for a while. Their kid sleeps in like a walk-in closet, and they have their TV on a stand. It's like a Murphy bed TV where they like kind of wheel the TV in when they want to watch it and wheel it out to a closet. They're the happiest people. They're way happier than me, because I still have that fire. I need this need to prove myself, that like this person needs to know that I'm hardworking. This person needs to know that like I'm an eloquent speaker. This person needs to know that I used to be a managing director, right? I still carry that stuff. And so I will say that, and then on the other side of it, I've coached people who I call post-achievement, post-financial, where they like, I have to work because to maintain my expensive lifestyle. But that's a choice. I love living by the beach. We used to live in Dumbo, Brooklyn. Like I love living in cultural hubs where it's like convenient and they have good schools and all that stuff. So that's a choice I've made, and my wife and I are on board with those choices. Best friend, he's completely, and he spends like 8 hours a day with his daughter, who sleeps in the closet. Now, some people would look at him and say they've got it all wrong. And he'd look at the corporate lawyer in New York that feels middle class because they are sending 2 kids to private school and be like, you're wrong. Guess what? There's no arbiter to who's right or wrong.
Yeah, when he was talking about his friend and how he's happy with less, it reminded me of that quote. I don't know, Erica, you remember, we were listening to Alexander the Great, like one of the stories, right? And he was like, one guy was like, look at him. He's Alexander the Great. He has conquered the world. What have you conquered? And he was looking at this like a Indian guru or whatever, right? And the Indian guru responded, well, I have conquered the desire to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
Something like
Right, there's
that.
this
Like,
Yeah.
story that Morgan Housel tells it in one of his books. It's who Joseph Heller is outside a party of a billionaire, and his friend turns to him and he says, "Joseph, you're a writer. You can be, this person makes more than you make in a minute. This person makes more than a year. He's got this. He's got mansions and this and that." And he's like, "How does that make you feel?" He's like, "Well, I feel fine because I have something that he'll never have." What's that? Enough.
Yeah.
that's exactly similar vein. So,
I,
so now that we had this conversation, I'm curious to know what a day in your life looks like at
Hmm.
this period of time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I wake up without an alarm about 7. Um, from 7 to 7:30, I meditate, and my kids are starting to make breakfast and all that. 7:30 to 8, we help them with their breakfast, make their lunch, and so on. 8 o'clock, we take turns dropping them off at school. I come back, I surf for about 90 minutes. Then I get back from surfing. I make myself a long breakfast. I usually like listen to something while I'm making that breakfast. Podcast, watching a YouTube video. Like that's the thing when you're a writer, it's like it's hard to know what is the boundary of work, because a lot of writing is just finding inspiration in unlikely in different things and different ideas. So I'll write, and then I'll usually do I'll listen to music, eat, and then from about 11 to 1 is kind of like a deep work time where I'll, usually I'm writing or recording a podcast, but like something that really takes that's my best creative time is right after that meditate, surf, eat window. Do that deep creative work, come back, usually have a mix of networking meetings, like either on Zoom or in locally, or coaching clients. That's how I make most of my income, is through coaching, mostly coaching high performers who are basically stuck in this. And then, so I'll do that for, a couple hours. Usually gets me to like 2:30. I'll kind of start doing like some of my more administrative tasks, paying bills, responding to emails, like cleaning up social media, editing thumbnails, that kind of stuff. Some days I'll go to the to the gym because I lift twice a week. Other days I'll go play basketball with my daughter, might read a bit, call a friend, and then have dinner with the family about 6. Usually my wife and I'll do maybe a little bit of like cleanup work after, and then at 7:30 we just start the whole wind down routine with the family. Do reading before bed, showers, all that. I might read a little. I'll meditate before bed. Go to bed about 10.
Sounds pretty
yeah.
stress free to me. Seems like you have figured it out. Here's a somewhat silly question. So when I was like researching your profile, I keep seeing these photos of you with 6-pack abs.
Mm-hmm.
how how hard was it to get
So
to the
I would
6-pack?
say that I have a big advantage in that my parents are in their 70s, and like they're just lean. I come from a lean, very lean, low body fat bloodline. So that's the starting point. And my wife makes sure that she's like, you need to, whenever you show a picture of your 6-pack, you need to show a picture of your parents, so that people have the context. She's like, my parents are Irish and Danish, and we do not have the Southeast Asian bloodline when it comes to BMI. So that I will start with that. I will say though, but this is again the thing is like before like if you think getting rich is going to make you like level up something, it's like no, it just adds gasoline to the thing you already were doing. So I have basically worked out, exercised 5 days a week since I was a gymnast in high school. So I've basically worked out 5 days a week since I was 12, and I'm 44. So I'm 30 for 32 years, 5 days a week. So that's a big one. And I find things that I love to do to work out. Like I hated running for a while. And then when we moved here, I'm like, oh my God, it's like 65 degrees every day, is like zero humidity, like not a cloud in the sky. Like, wow, who would have thought that I would love running after leaving New York? You'd have to run by the freaking East River or whatever. So I love it. But again, I hated running when I was in New York. I did CrossFit, but then I realized that like it was actually my motivation to do CrossFit was actually from like a core wound of like that was that 12-year-old version of me that felt so small, that got mugged and got like picked on, and I'm like, I need to show people like that I can like basically like quantify my physical aggression. Right, that was CrossFit. Then I healed myself. I'm like, yeah, that was a useful phase of my life, but like I actually don't. The source of fuel for that wasn't actually particularly healthy in hindsight, and I'm just going to move on to something different. I found surfing. I'm so blessed, but like we moved to LA so that I could surf. Right now, don't get me wrong, my wife also wanted to move to LA, but I couldn't just. Part of why I left Wall Street was like, how am I going to get a life where I could surf every day where I'm not retired? So that was the planning. And so it's like, okay, well, the first thing I need to leave Wall Street because there's not a lot of Wall Street jobs in LA. The next thing I need to do is get my wife on board. Thankfully, she was always on board to moving to LA. The next thing I need to do is I need to actually have a job that is flexible. So I was doing Zoom type work before the pandemic because I was like, it was in service of this goal, which was like, I want to surf every day. Right. And so like you can ask, it's like, wow, that seems like a dream day, but like so many of these seeds have been planted along the way. And there's just like I water the seeds that are important every day. Right. Part of the reason why I have the financial flexibility is that I started investing in the S&P 500 when I was 16. And I have never sold a share since, ever. So that's 28 years of compounding, 4 bull markets. Never, and I to this day at 44, I still dollar cost average. Right. And so like I try to accommodate like consistency on like, James Clear has that like get 1% better. That's crazy. That's just way too much. It's like get 1.001% better every day and then compound it over 10 years. So get better, become more self-aware and a little bit every day, compound it. I've been meditating 40 minutes a day for a decade, right? Exercise since I was 12, 5 days a week. Invested dollar cost averaging, S&P 500 since I was 16. Email newsletter, 437 consecutive weeks since I was 35. Podcast, approaching 52 weeks since I was 44, right? Find those things. And again, they rarely feel hard because they're fully in alignment.
I'm sure some of the people, I know you have a question, I'll get to you 1 second. But I'm sure some of people like me probably wondering, like you invest in the S&P 500. Is that like you have like a formula for it, like maybe 10% of your income or something that people can replicate?
I mean, no. It was probably in my Wall Street years, like 70% of my income.
Oh, wow.
And I still invest. I don't hold any cash. So I am always fully invested at 44 in the stock market.
So right now, when you receive income, do you have like a set amount? How do you decide
I live off
how
margin
much?
right
For
now.
real?
So right now I'm not. Right now it's more based on excess profits. Basically, like whatever I can't cover, whatever excess to my annual spending, I invest. So it's a little bit more backwards looking, and then I just do like a toehold amount, like $500 a month, just to just keep the machine moving.
Wait, can you explain when you said you live off the margin? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I don't have any cash. The only cash I have is that comes in from rad reads. And then, when you've been investing in the S&P 500, you get dividend income. So I have some interest bearing instruments. But basically the cash that I earn through rad reads usually just covers our living expenses. And sometimes the income is super volatile. I could go like 3 months without making any money. When I run out of money, like cash, I just borrow against my portfolio and then I pay it back.
That is an interesting strategy. I've never heard
I
of
want to
that.
be fully invested. And I want to be fully invested, and I believe in my earnings power.
But how much are you paying in the margin interest?
Right now it's 7%, so it's kind of brutal. But again, it's usually just a stopgap.
That is crazy.
It's like to manage liquidity.
Right.
And by the way, like even when the margin's 7%, the portfolio is up what? Like I haven't even checked, like 15% this year, 30% last year. Like the margin cost becomes negligible because you don't have to sell by staying
Right.
invested.
Is that strategy common knowledge in your circle, or
People think I'm absurd.
okay, so that's the
No,
common
my finance friends think I'm absurd. But
all
look,
right, so
I bet on myself. Like I know that my earnings, and that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. When you've been an entrepreneur for 10 years, you know how to make money. It's not always the way you want to make it. And I don't mean ethically versus unethically. It's just like I don't want to do consulting, but like if I ever felt like I was in a bind, hedge funds ask me to consult all the time. I don't want to do it, but if they ask me if I'm in a bind, I know who to call. A couple months later, I can get a hedge fund consulting job. Temporary. So I have this insane trust in myself.
How did you develop that level of trust?
So this is actually, I'm doing like some deep inner child work right now. And basically I had abandonment issues. And so that sense of trust, this is what I'm coming to at 44, is that sense of trust might not have, that was to obvious question earlier, might not have come from the healthiest source of fuel. Like I have this fundamental fear that I'll be alone and I have to learn how to be alone. So like almost makes me want to cry as I say that out loud. And it's not like rational because my parents are awesome. Like we didn't grow up poor, we grew up lower middle class, but look, that's what being human is, having fears that are not rational. Like, and so I believe that level of trust in myself was basically like from a very, very young age. I'm like, no one's going to be there for me. No one's going to help me. I'm going to be alone. I better know how to do things on my own. And look, it creates this like, look, for the whole thing about Western, like that's a great skill for Western capitalism. That doesn't lead to a great dad though. Doesn't lead to a great husband. Comes with its costs. Like I had a pretty heavy drinking problem for a while. So there's no free ride on that.
So as we've been having this conversation, or do you have a question you really want?
I'm really sorry. I'm still stuck in the pure finance mode that the answers that you give. I was like, I had a follow up, but I was like, if I ask now I'm moving the conversation backwards. But now that I brought it up, I have to. So, what are your thoughts on mortgages? Do you have one, or do you take the money out and put it in the S&P 500?
So I'm a longtime renter. I actually love debt. Like I think in that way, I think very much like a private equity person. If debt is cheap and like well structured, like I'm all for it, and especially if it's tax deductible. So I think like a private equity person. So I would love to have a mortgage, especially kind of pre these new rates levels. The problem is that it butts up with another principle that I have in my life, which is I value simplicity. And simplicity, renting is simplicity. Renting is life simplicity. And for most of my life, and my wife and I are very much on the same page on this, we actually value the simplicity of renting, especially in the early days of entrepreneurship. Furthermore, at this point, I don't think I could get a mortgage because my W-2 income my reported income is just very low and very volatile. So I'm not against, I think the mortgage is a wonderful concept. I think the other thing is that the way we have designed our lives, like I think the break even for a home with all the closing costs, and this was when things were going well, so it's probably longer now, is like 7 to 10 years. And the way that we have chosen to live our lives, it's very hard for me to tell you where we want to be in 7 years, not because we don't, well, I mean, we don't know, but because embodied in our lives is a sense of adventure. And so adventure and simplicity are at odds with my love for her mortgage. And for the past 20 years, they have overpowered them. And I think they will continue to overpower them until our kids are in college.
Instead of investing in S&P 500,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on investing in a dividend fund so you can extract more income?
I'm betting on myself, meaning that I actually want to capture the risk premium of the market. And liquidity is not what I need because I have liquidity through margin. So I want, like, it's a very simple thing. It's like, I believe that equity markets have risk premium over long periods of time. And I want to extract that risk premium. And as long as I can manage my liquidity, I'm sorry, I don't know the lingo for who's listening, but as long as I can manage my cash spending in, needs, then I want the rest of my money to be capturing the equity risk premium over multiple economic cycles, so 5-10 year periods. So when I invest in the S&P 500 today, I'm like, I don't need this money for 10 years at least.
Right. And which
And it's
ETF?
simple and it's tax efficient. SPY.
SPY. I need
Are
to
you
stock.
thinking about?
I need
You're
to
thinking?
rethink my strategy. I have too much cash on hand because of the 5% interest that I get on the savings. But anyways, Erica, yeah, you
Yeah, and you have to pay tax on that interest. Like the
exactly,
ordinary
yeah.
income. So it's not 5, it's 2.5.
Right. That's what I say. I need to
Feels like
rethink.
5. It feels like 5, but it's really 2.5.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right.
Thank you so much for being on the show. A lot of things to think about here. And for anyone who wants to dive into your blog, learn more, maybe become a little more self-aware themselves, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes, thank you. What a great conversation. Thank you for making it happen. So I would say that my blog and newsletter is the kind of main hub of everything. We create a lot of stuff every week, and so that would be radreads.co, and there's a newsletter there that has like 50,000 subscribers. And then the second thing I'm most passionate about is the Examine Life podcast, which kind of gets people who can help you lead a more examined life around career, around parenting, around substance abuse, or substance consumption. And that is the Examine Life podcast, both where we get your podcasts and also on YouTube. And I would say a fun part of that podcast is that every 3 episodes is a solo episode. So they're kind of like very long, drawn out narratives on some facet of my life that, like, there's 2 that go through these like margin questions. It's I could send you the links after, but they're the ones on what are your money rules.
Okay.
Right.
I should check those out.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.